Welcome back. This is the Weekend Report. I'm Masachaba Mposwa. United States President Donald Trump has doubled down on his stance on South Africa hosting the G20 Summit later this month, calling it a total disgrace. On his TruthSocial platform, Trump said no official from his administration would attend the gathering of world leaders in Johannesburg, citing his continued false narrative of Afrikaner farm murders as the reason for the withdrawal. Speaking at a business forum in Miami earlier this week, Trump said South Africa should not even be in the G20 anymore. Let's get some analysis of these latest developments now with international relations expert Dr. Kingsley Makhubela. Good morning, Doctor. Thanks for your time.
Good morning, Master. Thanks very much for the invitation.
What are your immediate reactions to these developments, Doctor?
Master, I think he meant to say no one will be coming from Washington to attend this meeting. And I've always held the view that JD Vance won't be coming because if you look at their objection to this meeting, it's embedded in what is going to be discussed during this G20. That has to do with the solidarity, diversity, and interdependence of the world, which they are very much opposed to. What they are likely to do, and I think they would do that, is to send an official from the embassy to attend, because decisions that are taken, they are taken by consensus. So the official who will be at the meeting would keep on saying, I have instruction from Washington not to accept this paragraph. I have instruction from Washington, this paragraph must be added. So it will be very difficult to reach a consensus document that will come out of the G20.
Now, South Africa will hand over the G20 presidency to the United States next year. So how do you host a summit and then transfer power to someone who says you shouldn't even be in the room?
That's what the big problem is. But Mascha, this is bigger than the US attending the G20. It has to do with the fracture that is happening within or the emergence of the multipolar world. This is the crux of the problem. And this is actually not necessarily the Trump position. It comes back from Joe Biden. You will recall, Maschaba, last year, July, Congress started to debate how to review the South African relations. And their biggest objection were around the relationship that South Africa has with China, with Russia, and Iran. And again, added to that was the question of taking Israel to the ICC and the ICJ. Those were fundamentally the objections of the American, and they framed that as a national security threat to the United States interests. And this is carried on by the current administration. And I find it very difficult, Mascha, that within our foreign policy framework here in the country, there's no understanding that the Democrats are not necessarily the Democrats who used to be an alliance with South Africa many years ago, who used to be very supportive of South Africa many years ago. So this is fundamentally a very big global change that we're seeing a move to the right around the world. And I keep on saying the global left has left us. So the global left is no longer there. And there's no understanding. I mean, I saw during UNGA, there was a meeting with Senator Kuhn. Now, Senator Kuhn, he's the one who's responsible. He's a senator from Delaware. But he was in charge of the Biden campaign. And he's the one who brought some of this element that South Africa must be censured for its behavior. So it's a huge problem that I don't think there's a better grasp and understanding within the country as to how to manage this emerging multipolar world with the biggest threat that it poses to the Western hegemony. And at the heart of that Western hegemony is the domination of the United States, which is seen as the biggest threat.
Now, Trump used the phrase, look at South Africa, what's going on, without elaboration. What is it that Trump seems to know about or thinks he knows about South Africa, that ordinary South African citizens, that we don't know about our own country? Or is this about what he wants the world to believe?
Maschaba, I think there was a misfire. There were two statements that he issued out during the course of this week. You would recall the first statement, he was talking at a conference in Miami where he said South Africa flooding Miami. I think he wanted to say South America. And he ended up saying South Africa, and he carried on that narrative of South Africa and brought in South America. There's no evidence of a huge migration from South Africa to Miami. To the contrary, there's evidence of Southern American people moving to Miami because of the proximity to that. Now he came up with a statement that South Africa, the United States won't be participating at the G20, and that South Africa doesn't belong to the Gs actually. But he has also said something fundamentally, Maschaba, that there's the emergence of the G2, meaning the United States and China, and that he will be hosting the G20 in Miami, and China will be hosting APEC, and that there must be some working relations about this too. Now, if you look at the G20, if it's the G2, if it's to emerge as a center of political gravity around the world, you're looking at 43% of the global GDP concentrated on two countries. I don't think China would accept that. I don't think China would play for the spade. But there's a big reproach mark towards China that actually we are accused of having relations with. As we are talking about today, the world is actually scintillating on a serious threat of the collapse of the automobile industry because of the Nexperia chips that China has withheld following the conflict they've had with the Netherlands. So there are a lot of global tensions that I imagine that are making the Americans very unsettled, particularly with the relationship that some of the more key smaller countries are having with China and Russia, particularly with China is the biggest threat.
Sure. So now, Doctor, I mean, do the other leaders within the G20 have any power to reprimand Donald Trump? And if so, how far do their powers extend?
Well, you know, states are very independent, and there's no state that can reprimand another state. So you are unlikely to see any censure of the American. You are likely to see people appealing to everyone to attend the forthcoming G20 that now we know it's in Miami. And I've seen statements in the past that it will be at Mar-a-Lago, which is his own residence. So we are unlikely to see a very strong statement condemning Trump. As I'm saying, Maschaba, it's because of the fracture around the emerging powers and the disappearing powers. And at the heart of this, it's some of the countries that are attending from the G7 who will be part of this G20, who are uncomfortable about the emergence of this multipolar world because it threatens their power holding, their hegemony around the world, the domination of different institutions, financial institutions, even political institutions around the world. So you are unlikely to see a very strong statement coming out of this G20. Maschaba, as we are talking, the global economy is not looking good. The global debt has gone up. I mean, last time I think me and you, we spoke, the global debt was about 300 trillion. Now it runs at 332 trillion.
Sure.
And the growth of the global economy is only 120 trillion in the last 3-4 years. So you are seeing serious challenges, and one had hoped that this G20 will be able to deal with the challenges around this growing global debt, particularly the public debt that is driven actually by the United States. The United States has just added another trillion in its own debt. If you look at the global debt of the US now, they're standing at close to $30 trillion. So it's a huge problem. So you're unlikely to see a concrete statement that comes out of this with respect to the global economy and the challenges and how to stimulate this growth.
Sure. So, Doctor, if tensions continue to rise, then what does South Africa stand to lose diplomatically or even economically? And conversely, what might we gain by holding our independent ground?
You know, Maschaba, I think it's very important to hold our independent ground. There are 3 issues that have emerged in the last 2 weeks that are framing global tension that we're seeing. The Russians have launched what they call the Brezhnev missile, and they've now launched the Posten missile. The Chinese have just unveiled yesterday the Jiang battleship. So these are causing tensions. That's why you've seen the Americans are saying they're going to go back to nuclear testing. So we're going to be tintillating around the United States and the Chinese and the Russians and the threat that they all perceive each of them possesses. And it would affect peripheral countries like us who are not at the core of that conflict. But I think we need to stand our ground. I think we need to revamp our foreign policy. I wouldn't be surprised, Ms. Chava, to learn that the Americans actually have refused to accept, or they are dragging their feet in accepting the accreditation of our new ambassador, because it's inconceivable for me that up to now we haven't sent any requests for an ambassador. We can't afford not to have an ambassador in Washington now. And I think I wouldn't be surprised, that's what I'm saying, that the Americans are dragging their feet in terms of giving approval.
Doctor, thank you so much for your time this morning.
It's always a pleasure, Ms. Chava. Thank you.
That was international relations expert Dr. Kingsley Makhubela.